Good morning, biology students. This is Miss Luck coming to you live from my classroom. Today, we are going to talk about lipids and proteins. Yesterday, you learned a bit about carbohydrates, and so today we're going to talk about lipids and proteins. You should have just finished a reading about lipids in your group, so I want to highlight some of the information you just read about. Today's objectives are differentiate between saturated and unsaturated fat molecules and describing the relationship between amino acids and proteins. So in your notebook, can you make lipids a little bit bigger so that you can see that this is just kind of a different category than where you were yesterday with your carbohydrates? A lipid is one of three nutrients that does provide our body with energy. Carbohydrates, the other one, and proteins. So those are the other two. Today I'm going to talk about lipids and proteins. We also talk about lipids synonymous with being fats. So I'm going to talk about saturated fats and unsaturated fats. Fats have an important purpose in our body. So they act as a long-term energy storage. It provides all of us with warmth as well as animals, as you read, in the ocean with blubber, and they're an important building block in our cell membranes. So we have two kinds of fats. We have saturated fats and unsaturated fats. And if you can see this long chain of carbons with hydrogens attached to it, a saturated fat has no double bond between the carbons. Compare that to what you see down here with your unsaturated fats. Do you see this double bond right here? This causes a kink in its shape. So when we talk about saturated fats versus unsaturated fats, there's a reason they have the shape they do have. Lipids are not polymers. They do not have monomers. So what is the difference? Saturated fats are long straight chains of carbon atoms. They're a solid at room temperature. I have highlighted the S so that you can see that saturated fats are solid at room temperature, and they mainly come from animal products. So they are going to be the fat marbled in meat, butter, eggs. Unsaturated fats have long kink chains of carbons due to that double bond that I showed you on that previous slide. They're liquid at room temperature. So I've made the U a little bit bigger. I'd like you to do the same thing in your notebook. It will help you when I go back to telling me what's a saturated fat and what's an unsaturated fat. So make that big letter U. They're liquid at room temperature. And they're mostly your plant products. So they're going to be like an avocado or some of your oils. Let me give you another slide of like good and bad. So sometimes we hear, oh, that's a good fat, or oh, that's a bad fat. What does that even mean? Olive oil, avocado, nuts, salmon, all are considered good fats. Fats that are good for your body. I see they misspelled good in this little picture. So what's a bad fat? A bad fat is one that is a solid at room temperature. Things like margarine, hopefully none of you use margarine, butter, beef, shortening, all of those are considered bad fats. Too many bad fats can get clogged in our arteries, and that's what can lead to atherosclerosis and some of our heart diseases and obesity. So that's why I want to use the bad fats in moderation. Here's another example of like what exactly is in a saturated fat and what exactly is in an unsaturated fat. Do you notice we have red X's kind of telling us, yeah, maybe limit those foods a bit. Fast foods, fried foods, donuts, all fit into another category called trans fats. Let me explain that in a minute. Then you've got your saturated fats, your butter, your fatty meats, your full dairy products, poultry skin. Those all fit under saturated fats. Again, limit that amount. Unsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature. So a lot of your oils, your canola oil, olive oil. Yes, I know avocado is not a liquid, and I know most nuts, but those still fit into the category of your unsaturated fats. Back to your trans fats for a minute. So in trans fats, what they have done is they've been able to hydrogenate, try that word, an unsaturated fat basically pumping hydrogens into an unsaturated fat to make it into a saturated fat to increase its shelf life. The problem with trans fats, and I think that the government has pretty much wiped those out from being even manufactured. But the problem was our bodies don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to break it down. They don't know what to do with that trans fat. So it just kind of has been clogging in our arteries. Why do we even have fats in our foods? Well, they do enhance flavor and provide some juiciness, some texture, some tenderness. So I can understand that. But again, we do worry about how many saturated fats are in our diet versus unsaturated fats. So let me just have you pause and reflect for a minute. Think about your last meal. Maybe it wasn't breakfast. Maybe it was dinner last night. Can you identify where in your meal you had saturated fats? I'm pointing to the butter and the bacon. And where you had maybe some unsaturated fat. I'm pointing to the peanut butter. Think about that for a minute and write down your answer. How was your last meal? More unsaturated fats than saturated? I hope so. All right, we're going to switch gears here to proteins. Again, in your notebook, make maybe a bigger font saying proteins, our next energy source. A protein comes from animal or plant-like proteins. So fish, meat, eggs, dairy, quinoa, lentils, nuts, oats. But wait, didn't you just tell me these were saturated and unsaturated fats? I did. And if you've ever seen anybody at home cutting off some of this saturated fat off your meat, they're trying to limit that in your diet. And again, not have too much because this can clog arteries. Proteins do all the jobs in a cell. So they're really building blocks for our cells. But look at this little chart and notice what it can do. It's the protein in our hair and nails, proteins in our muscles, proteins in cellular messengers, antibodies, blood, brain and nerves, enzymes, and cellular construction workers. So proteins are really important. They're the building blocks of our cells. They are made up of amino acids. Amino acids make up these proteins, and they're like boom, 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 boom. Each one of these is a little amino acid. They've been color-coded because the arrangement of them tell us what protein they make. Keep that in mind. These are the monomers for protein. There are 20 different amino acids, which is why we need a variety of foods and a variety of proteins, because your body can, I'm going to go back a slide, rearrange these to make the protein that it needs. So there's 20 different amino acids. They're made of hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and sometimes sulfur. There's a little sulfur over here. Here we go. And nitrogen. That's what's covered up. If I move me here a little bit. Nope, I don't want to move. There we go. Okay. Then how does your body use these amino acids? You don't specifically eat that protein. You don't need to eat hair and nails to get the protein to make hair and nails, right? That'd be gross. So instead, we have these building blocks of amino acids that when put together make this protein. So we eat our meat and our body says, oh, we need this protein for our hair and nails or hemoglobin, and it knows to put the amino acids in the order that it needs to be put in. So our DNA tells our body to do that. Luckily we aren't, but the DNA tells them how to link them all together. Every protein has a unique shape based on how it's folded and the job it has to do. So let me use this analogy. Simone Biles, this amazing gymnast, she has to execute a number of different routines. And every routine has a specific order and a specific fold or a specific bend in a specific way. Still with me? What would happen if she grew 3 feet taller? Would she be able to spin as much as she can? Will she be able to, that tuck be as tight as it needs to be? That might be tougher. What would happen? Oh, let me move me again. What would happen if Simone switched the order of the number of her rotations in her routine? So her routine would not be able to do the same. So Simone would not be able to do her job as a protein. So let's pause and reflect one more time. In your notebook, write down the answer to these two questions. What makes proteins unique? And how does their shape contribute to their function?